medium we think is in a relatively good spot. It's just the other ones are pretty strong, so we wanted to kind of like adjust where people are going to go with their equip loads and make conscious decision on which one to use. So we decided to increase the dodge cost for the heavy equip load.
Welcome to Forged in Aeternum, where we talk about all things New World. Today we have a very special episode of Balance of Power. I'm joined by two combat experts here. Today is going to be my last Balance of Power. I am making room for these two fine gentlemen to take over and sort of shepherd the ship here, so to speak. I'm still in New World, don't worry about it. I'm just transitioning to a slightly different role to make room for that. I thought we'd start out by getting to know a little bit. I mean, you guys have already done some videos. The flail video was a total hit with the community, but maybe introduce yourself, Josh, and tell the community a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Josh. I'm a combat designer on the team. As I previously mentioned, I did work with the flail in the past, as well as work with various other aspects of combat, including perks, all the previous weapons and their weapon trees and how they all work out.
What makes you passionate about combat?
I just love the timing, the dynamics of it, how it's constantly changing, the overall kind of quality and feel of it, and how everything works together, how the characters move, and it's kind of like a lot of combat. It turns into kind of like a dance, like a violent dance, and I just love watching the characters kind of interact with each other and dodge attacks, block attacks, dynamically exchange violence with each other. It's a weird way to phrase it.
I like that, the violent dance of Josh. And JR, our combat lead, very excited to have you sort of, formally take over and shepherd the ship here. JR, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you like about combat?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been with the team about a year now, and I really I fell in love with the combat in New World specifically because it's very much like single player games I've played, and I haven't played another MMO that goes this in depth with the combat and it has this many mechanics that all work really well over the network. I guess I really enjoy that aspect of the game. It's just like how in this role I have, I guess, the power to improve on that and really just build on it. There's so many other mechanics that we could draw on from other games and explore in our game and do it in a way that maybe hasn't been seen in other MMOs.
It's exciting. Well, let's jump into some balance. First, I want to talk a little bit about, we released the 1.9 balance patch, the January balance patch. Give me a highlight or two of some of the changes we made there and why we made those changes, Josh.
All right, so one of the bigger ones we did was adjust the equip load for the heavy equip load, which we initially were basically trying to figure out exactly what would you want to do, if you want to adjust medium, adjust heavy. But medium we think is in a relatively good spot. It's just the other ones are pretty strong, so we wanted to kind of adjust where people are going to go with their equip loads and make conscious decision on which one to use. So we decided to increase the dodge cost for the heavy equip load, mainly because we don't want to go back into our dodge spam meta because we removed some of the ATBs and other things that made it so dodges were a little bit easier. And so we increased the stamina cost. We think that'll kind of give medium a little bit more value and tie into some of the things we might look into doing in the future.
Awesome. And JR, any change you want to highlight from that balance patch?
One of them was with the flamethrower actually. So we actually slowed down the speed when you're using flamethrower a little bit, make it a little less oppressive, because definitely having people chase you down with just an infinitely going flamethrower wasn't too fun. So. And
there was a change on Fireball, right? Just to reduce the little spikiness in damage. I know that's something, Josh, that you're looking at. Is that we want to make sure that there aren't too many spikes in damage, right?
Yeah. So the change we did was for the perk, so that way it doesn't affect the overall usage of the ability, just because the base ability is in a pretty good spot, but the perk allowed it. So if you were just using dots, you could kind of stack up the dots and keep it in power going for a long period of time. And so we reduced the duration that perk would remain active, just to allow it to keep that extra power, but not kind of be cheesable by players. And so we could address it without having it affect the base functionality of it.
I think it's super important. Like what you're looking at is sort of like eliminating some of those extremes, the power, but not sort of reducing the overall playability of the weapon. Cool. So something else I wanted to address was we do currently have 2 artifacts that are turned off. I believe they'll be turned off and fixed by the time this airs, but J.R., why don't you tell us a little bit about why we had to turn them off and what's going to be fixed here?
Sure. Yeah, so we did have an issue with the wing leather shoes and then later the bolt caster. The case with the wing leather shoes was we discovered an issue where you could basically apply infinite haste, and that was really important to get fixed right away. The fastest way for us to fix these problems is actually to turn off the affected items until we have a fix that we can patch. So that's what we had to do, unfortunately, with the wing leather shoes. And then the case with Boltcaster was an issue with the way that we do damage conversion. So as you know, we've been adjusting damage for PvE upwards for our ranged weapons, and then adjusting downwards back down in PvP modes. Unfortunately, there's an issue with the damage conversion where that doesn't actually take place in PvP, so that the damage doesn't get scaled down. And Boltcaster has like the highest conversion rate, and it was just a real issue. So we had to disable that. But we will have fixes coming for the January 24th update, so we expect both of those to be re-enabled for that.
Awesome. And then normally now we would spend the rest of the time talking about our February balance update. We are actually filming this early in January because both of these two fine, usually Seattle people, were in Irvine. So we don't have a ton of information yet about the February balance patch, so I thought we'd do something a little different, especially since we have the new champions of combat here. Rather than talk specifics of February, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the future, the vision, what you guys think about combat. And I have a couple sort of high-level areas I want to talk about that I know you guys are going to be spending some time on. So let's jump into some of those. Let's start out with you. I think equip weights is one of the very special things about our game. I know we did some balance patches, some balance changes here recently, but I know more is coming. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on equip weights and where we're going here.
So one thing we want to do is balance equip weights so they have more of a universal kind of value for each one, and our ideal goal would be each one is kind of like equally used, which right now it's pretty heavily favored for the light equip load and heavy with a very minimal medium equip load usage. So we want to try and normalize those a bit. So one thing we want to start looking into is kind of having the medium equip load be like the default. So there's really no pros or negatives on it. It's just the baseline. And then as you go into heavy or light, you gain benefits or disadvantages based on those equip loads. So if you go to light, you'll gain more damage or offensive ability, but you'll lose some of the survivability or defensive aspects of your equip load. And then same thing with heavy, you'll lose some damage, but you'll gain survivability and defensiveness. And so we want to start looking into like medium is just kind of like blanket zeros across the board, kind of a default equip load. And then just as you go from there and as you increase or decrease your weight, that's when we start adding kind of unique characteristics of each one.
Now, in equip loads, they each have a different dodge roll mechanic. Is that something we anticipate continuing? And if so, why, JR?
Yeah, I think so. It is one of the tells for your equip load is like how you dodge, and it is also another way that distinguishes them from each other. We have definitely talked about other things that we could do with dodge in the past. But we don't currently have any plans to move away from that in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I like that they're different animations, and we've normalized a lot of the iframes and timings of that, right, Josh?
Yeah, there's the iframes. They all have the same amount, which we've discussed adjusting in the future. And then they also have there's a homing, ignore homing aspect where you won't just have someone like home on you when you dodge, and we've kind of normalized those as well.
Cool. Another area that I know we're going to be working on that I'm excited about is the life staff. Healing's a big topic. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the life staff and where we may be going with that in the future.
So the main thing we want to do for the life staff in the future is kind of separate the trees. Right now it's pretty much just healing, but the trees are broken up into healing and protection. So we'd want to lean into that more. So the left tree would be just purely healing focused, and then the right tree would be more about keeping players alive if they don't necessarily need a healing. So we want to lean into that, which we don't really have all the specifics nailed down yet, but we'd like to basically make it so there's a proactive and reactive aspects of the trees. So if you're like in an expedition or all your teammates are pretty good on health, you can kind of overload them with the protection side and keep them ready to take those hits for once all the boss hits come in, or the big waves of enemies, and then you can utilize that protection you put on beforehand to keep yourself alive before you pivot over to the healing.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like I know in high-end PvE circles, they talk about overhealing, right? And like protection is a way to avoid overhealing and just use the healing to maximum because you have protection doing the other side. So yeah, all cool stuff. JR, weapon synergy is something else I like to talk about. One of the super special things about New World is we have 2 weapons. Any plans or things you're thinking about in the future to make weapons synergize better?
Yeah, there's definitely, we've been talking about doing things where more of the passive aspects of a weapon might carry over when you swap. So, you might do an ability that's like right now, most weapons, the passives will end when you swap immediately. We'll definitely have to do a lot of work with that if we do kind of lean into the weapon synergies, because a lot of those passives would be just like broken, like power-wise, if we just flat out just said all passives exist when you swap. So we definitely have to be careful about that, but we definitely want to be like strategic in looking for the ones that can persist and maybe adding new ones or changing existing ones to work better with that.
I think it's super fun. Like I love, the idea of having almost a primary weapon that I do a lot of damage with, and then like it can breathe new life into some of the support weapons, like give them a stronger role as a secondary weapon. So it's cool. Something else. Homing and translation is something we're going to be working on. First of all, almost everyone that watches Balance of Power is an amazing combat expert. But just in case there's one or two Michael Lovins watching, tell us a little bit, what is homing, first of all, and translation, and how does it relate to attacks?
So the homing is basically the kind of magnetism you get when you're in the middle of an attack that kind of pulls you either your rotation or like the distance away from enemy to kind of make it easier to hit, especially in the MMO with online capabilities and server latency. You want that extra little bit to actually make sure attacks hit. And so we're going to be doing a path through all weapons to kind of improve them, make them feel a little bit better, hopefully remove some of the desyncs and kind of issues that we have where some weapons can either feel like they attract too much or not enough. And so we want to do a path through those and just make it easier to have those weapons feel like they actually like connect when they should and don't connect when they shouldn't.
I'm asking for a friend who's a very heavy Voidblade user. Will it be a part of this pass, do you think?
Definitely will, just because it is one of the ones that gets called out a good amount.
Awesome. Another thing that I think is super cool about New World's combat system is, there aren't a million buttons like in other games, but like each button has very specific uses with timing and distance. And we also have the ability to do light and heavy attacks with one button. Heavy attacks, though, outside of PvE, maybe don't get as much usage as we want. Tell me a little bit, like, are there any thoughts about heavy attacks? What are we thinking about with it?
Yeah, definitely. Heavy attacks are rarely used in PvP because of the commitment that they take, right? Like when you're charging up a heavy attack, especially melee, you're locked in place, and just the duration that it takes to charge is also variable based on the weapons you're using. So we kind of wanted to do a pass on heavy attacks, make them easier to use in a variety of situations, not just in PvE where your target is just standing still waiting for you to attack them. And some of the things that we've been talking about that are possibly expensive for animation costs, which is why we have to be careful there. But maybe allowing for movement while you're charging, more like. But yeah, that's definitely an area that we want to improve on.
Awesome. Magic is another one I want to talk a little about. Mana has sort of a weird positioning, I think, in the game right now. What do you think about the positioning of mana in the game, and where do you want to take it in the future, Josh?
Yeah, mana's in a weird state mainly just because it's either ignored entirely or it's extremely limiting. So it's very much so kind of a battle of attrition style meter now, where you just run out of mana and you either can't do anything or you have to pop a potion to just get it back, and then you ignore it until you run out again. And so we want to look into kind of making the flow of mana a little bit more dynamic, where we increase the regen rate. So right now it's about 50-ish seconds to regenerate mana from full if you don't have any modifiers. And so we want to basically cut that to like a quarter of the amount of time. So it does regenerate pretty quickly, but you can also burn through it relatively quickly. And so it's more of kind of a burst limiter, something that if you do run out, you're not hindered for the next 30, 50 seconds until you eventually get it back. Or you can maybe open up a slot to no longer have to worry about just having that mana on your consumable bar that hinders you getting something else. And so to kind of make it one of the things where it's more dynamic and fun to interact with, instead of it just being an annoyance to work around. So.
It's cool. I like the direction for that. And I think last for you, JR, any sort of thoughts on, maybe not directly combat related, but sort of like navigation and locomotion and the character? Or is there work being done there? What are your goals there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how everyone else thought about the game when they first played it, like the first impression. But the first time I played the game, the first thing I noticed was, some of our just basic movement could use some work, right? We have like areas where maybe our animations don't blend well together, or there's abrupt transitions. So this is something that we've been working with the animation team to smooth out, and there's some really exciting stuff coming soon that it really just like ups the polish of just moving around the world, which you're doing most of the time in the game. So
that's awesome. Hey, well, thanks everyone for sort of going through some of the vision of stuff. I want to make sure there's no time on any of these. These are things we're sort of working on in the background. It's sort of like over the next year-ish, expect to see a lot of this stuff. Nothing's sort of promised in the short term, but just to give you a sort of a glimpse under the fur carpet, so to speak, of where we might be going in the future. With that, I want to close. I want to say, hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. I do have a community question to sort of set you guys up for success. The community question is, what questions do you have for our new leaders of combat on the vision of combat in the future? Put any questions you have, any things you want to know about what they're thinking about combat, where we're going in the future, in the comments, and maybe in a future episode we'll take those questions and start to dive into the vision here. With that, please like and subscribe, all those things. Let us know you enjoy the show. And in the future, you'll be led by these two experts. It's been a pleasure doing Balance of Power with you all, and see you all in Aeternum.
We're here today to talk about the Year of the Dragon micro event.